most of all, ask the question, how are you doing today? And really mean it. Because they may say, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, even if you know they're not, but you're planting a seed and you never know when that seed will start to germinate. They need to know that you're available, that you don't judge.
Mental health champions, I'm super excited to bring on someone who works in women's health leadership. She has a big passion for giving back through her experiences and stories. So without further ado, Melissa, welcome back to another podcast, and this time a mental health break.
Yeah, I am so happy to chat with you again, Vincent. I've enjoyed our conversations before. And I tell you, I'm so happy that you do this mental health podcast focusing on mental health because it's such an important topic. And so often we're not talking enough about it.
Thank you for the kind words, and thank you again for joining us. Everyone, thank you for tuning in today to another episode here on a mental health break. I want to thank you for keeping the show a top 5% global show. It allows us to continue to make a big difference all around the world, and we're brought to you today by Coming Alive Podcast Production at comingalivepodcastproduction.com. And as I mentioned, we have a unique take on health and mental health today. My goal is to provide as many different ways to shed light on mental health. So, Melissa, I'll open up the floor to you. What led you to want to make a difference in this field?
Well, I tell you, like every family, my family has been touched by mental health and substance use disorder, but really, I became super passionate and became an advocate when I started working at Hazelden Betty Ford. So I worked there for about 10 years, leading marketing and strategy. And they're the nation's largest nonprofit substance use disorder and mental health organization. And I think as any good marketing leader, I looked into what the competition was. And the competition there was not another treatment center. It was families that did nothing. And for me, that was really scary. So I started digging into that. And one of the biggest reasons families did nothing was because of the stigma around mental health and addiction. And so they were too worried about what their friends and their family and their neighbors would think. And so they just didn't get care. When there's really great care available for mental health and addiction in this country, we've got great care available. And when I see that people aren't getting the care because of that stigma, that's when I really became an advocate to start breaking down that stigma, doing everything I can, and helping coach how they could also break down the stigma. And all that's doing is just when we break down those barriers, it allows more people to get the help that they need.
Yes, we need to keep having conversations like this. And thank you for being courageous enough to share your story with your family being affected by mental health. You're saying substance abuse directly. If there's someone listening on today who may be going through something similar and doesn't know what to do, what advice can you offer from your experience?
So if they're themselves are having an issue or if they are concerned about a loved one, um, I always tell the people, especially if they're concerned about a loved one, to ask the question and don't leave it something that's hidden in the dark. And that's part of the reason why we have such a problem in this country around these types of issues. So if you're concerned about your loved one, don't think that it's too uncomfortable to have the conversation. I always encourage people to start to open that door because you might be the first opportunity the person has had to reach out their hand for help. And that particular day, you might just be planting the seed, but maybe in a month, a week, a year, they'll be ready to get the care that they need. And if you yourself are ready today to reach out for help, whether it's around addiction or around a mental health issue, that's where I say there's plenty of really great providers out there. Frankly, there's a lot of people out there providing care that's not so great. So I would go through and do your research, find out where provides good care in your area and just reach out your hand for help. What we did see when I was working in the field for so long was that most often it was the family members that were reaching out for help, particularly around addiction issues. And those family members, they're concerned, they're worried, they don't know what to do, they don't know where to turn. And oftentimes they would call us and say, listen, my brother, sister, cousin is having an issue with drugs or alcohol. I don't know what to do. And we'd have to coach them on how to have that conversation with them. And a lot of times it's just saying, how did that impact you? because if somebody is in your life is suffering, it's going to affect everybody around them.
Thank you for sharing all that. Everyone, you are not alone. And be sure to stick around to the end of the show. We're going to share her contact info. She can become a great resource for you. And it is always cool when I find someone on that entrepreneur show who can also make a difference here. It used to happen a lot more, but this is the first one I remember in a while. So thank you for joining here. And now, your experience, you just mentioned a little bit at work, has some of the mental health overlap. Let's share some more overlap to resonate with our listeners.
Well, I tell you, I work so often with mission-driven brands and purpose-driven brands as a marketing consultant. And because I've spent so much time in substance use disorder and mental health, I oftentimes work with organizations that are related to substance use disorder or mental health, just kind of in that overall behavioral health field. Because just to be frank, in healthcare, it's still kind of off to the side. And there's not that many people with experience there, and that's where I do so much to try to break down stigma, and I do a lot of public speaking, I do podcasts like this. I just applaud you over and over that you've done so much to break down stigma. I mean, you've had guests on talking about substance use disorder and their own journeys. You had, Carrie Bates on not too long ago, who's an Olympian that I used to work with Carrie, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
amazing. We need more people like her to talk about their own personal journeys because it normalizes the fact that, oh, wow, you can be a gold medalist and have a challenge with substance use disorder. Well, then maybe I could too. I mean, I worked for an organization that had the iconic Betty Ford Center as part of its family. And um, Betty Ford was the former first lady of this country, and she got help for her substance use and she didn't have to tell anybody. She could have kept it secret, but she actually made the decision to release it to the press because she knew what it would do to break down that stigma and how it would open doors. And that was really dramatic change for women in this country to be able to ask for help because before that it was just so shameful if mom had a problem with drugs or alcohol and Betty Ford opened the door. And even today, due to podcasts like yours and people like you being advocates and telling the stories, we've seen a lot more. I think the stigma around mental health has gone away, but the stigma around substance use and addiction is still there. In fact, there's an organization called Shatterproof that does so much around advocacy around substance use. And they did a study and it said that 74% of Americans do not view substance use disorder as a chronic medical condition. They still think it's just this moral failing, if you will. And the one that really kills me is that 45% of the people who responded to their survey said they don't want to live next door to someone with a substance use disorder. And that one just really kills me because that is just saying, I mean, that you don't want someone living next door, that's really, really shameful. And that's saying what they think about people with a chronic medical condition like this.
And no one's perfect. I think at the end of that, to prejudge someone based on something they may or may not have done 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So thank you for shedding light to that. But in order for everyone to continue being their best, I love to ask each guest, what are some things you do to take care of your mental health? Because it is not a one size fits all.
Oh, absolutely. Like, and I love that you asked this because it gives people ideas, but again, it normalizes self-care. It normalizes taking care of your mental health. And that's so important. And I will just tell you, this is a whole nother podcast, but I had several, two, in fact, deaths in the family last month. And
With your loss.
so I've watched other people deal with grief, and I tell you what I've decided about my grief with these two right in a row deaths is that I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to talk about it as much as I need to. And I went to a play with two girlfriends on Friday, and I just told them I am going to be talking about death and my grief and about my two loved ones who passed last month and they're okay with it because they care about me and they understand that this is a journey that I'm on. And so for me, dealing with that grief, I'm trying to grieve out loud. And so that helps me to get as much help as I possibly can. I am currently not going to therapy, but I'm a huge fan. I've been to therapy off and on during my life, and I'm a huge fan of normalizing that and destigmatizing that so that people understand this is something that's okay to do and this is something that helps, and it's just a matter of healthcare. Like, people are okay with getting an annual physical. Women are okay going to get a mammogram. And then people are uncomfortable going to take care of their mental health when we know that it impacts every other part of your health. My girlfriend a couple weeks ago actually said, "Do you need to go and get some professional help for your grief?" And I said, "I might. But right now, what I'm doing is just talking the ear off of everybody I know. But I'm okay with that. And I at least have people in my life who are also open enough to and willing to tell me that maybe that's something I need to consider to deal with grief as well."
Well, thank you for sharing that and the therapy and being with your friends. It is important to have some form of support system in your life, right? Even though I don't see people every day as an entrepreneur, I have interactions like this where that human connection can go such a long way. And everyone, if you don't have anyone to talk to, you're thinking that you can always go out to a library, to a club, to a rotary. There's always somewhere where there's people getting together and you can really find people doing the same thing you like to do or common interests. So thank you for sharing that. It's been really great to have this conversation on the other side of just business, but I will plug her real quick. She has an awesome business, Shackelford Strategies. We'll be sure to talk about it again at the end. But another way you make a difference is through writing. Now, before we dive into that book, and it is a book to help people inspire connection, did you find the writing process therapeutic at all?
Yeah, I did. And in fact, part of the journey of writing my book was really inspired by somebody who told me that they see people struggling. And the specific was I was on a podcast much like this, and it was a marketing podcast because that's what I do. I'm a marketer, and the host said he's seeing a lot of young marketers leave the profession because they feel like they've sold their soul. And that really just tells me that they feel like they're doing something. And marketing can get very manipulative and very data driven and all that. And I just said that's not been my experience. I started with an article and the article turned into two articles and then it turned into a book. But I also had the opportunity to talk about a couple of professional experiences I had that I was with an organization that didn't really match my values. And I think that's where people get into a lot of this burnout because they're doing things that they don't feel good about and they're not filling up their cup every day. And so for me, it was also really therapeutic to write about those experiences. At the time, I was uncertain about do I leave this situation because it's nice to have a steady paycheck. But for me, it was really important to say, I need to be in a situation that I feel good about, that I find meaning in, and that I feel is aligned with my values. And I totally understand how people are in these burnout situations. They're just exhausted and they're exhausted mentally and physically because they're in situations that don't match their values. So I feel very fortunate. I'm very hyper aware of my privilege and being able to change my situation. Not everybody can. Um, but for me, that was really a helpful process. I'm an off and on journaler, and that's something else that I've done for many years, off and on, to help me through things. And in fact, as my mother was in hospice, one of my friends actually recommended. She said, "Are you journaling? You need to journal through this process." And I started doing that because it just kind of helped me process things, and so that's helpful. But for me, even the book, I felt like I was talking through some of my own challenges in my life, but also being able to give back to others through my book, that was really important to me. I've been given so much. I've mentioned so many of my friends in my life and my support system that give to me and help me that the book for me was also a way for me to help others and to maybe give some of my bumps and bruises, giving that experience to others so that they don't have to have the same bumps and bruises.
I love that. Is there a second book coming from you?
I feel like there will be. I don't have one yet. I know you've done a number of them. I feel like I'm still in the guts of this one. Someone actually just last week asked if I'll do another one. I've got kind of some ideas cooking, and I know you've done a number of them, and you've done a number around mental health, which again, I just applaud you because that's how we break down the stigma. That's how we get more people having conversations like these. And that's really what for me, a lot of my advocacy is just encouraging people to have conversations so that they normalize all of this, that this is just another part of healthcare. I do healthcare marketing. And so often people forget that substance use and mental health are part of healthcare marketing.
I love that. And thank you for bringing awareness to that. I now have a time for some other questions I love, and that's if you can give a piece of advice to anyone who may be tuning in today who's going through a really tough time and can't seem to find the answers. Can you provide them some advice?
So I'll say a couple things. And first, I'll just start with substance use. And there's a lot of people. We know about 10 to 15% of the country is struggling with a substance use, and that it's very normal. There's a lot of people out there that are also in the same situation. But we also know only about 10% of those that have a substance use disorder get help. So it's a very, very small number of people who get help. I would say to those folks, if you're struggling, there is help available. There's lots of great care. You can get it from your living room. There's telehealth available. There's plenty of in-person care available, but that I just want to remind people there's great care available, whether it's for opioids, for alcohol, what have you, it doesn't matter. And that this is really judgment-free, stigma-free help that's available. And I would say if someone's concerned about their mental health, if they're struggling with anxiety or depression or who knows what, because we've all been there. I mentioned right now, we have very recent death in the family and having that grief as another layer on top of my mental health. Know that also professional help is available and there's no judgment. And I'm just a huge fan since COVID. We've really normalized getting help virtually. And I think that's the easiest way to do it. If you're thinking about getting care for your mental health, it's really simple. It's a very low barrier to say, well, yeah, I'll try a couple of telehealth visits with a professional because there's care available and it does work. It's all evidence based and it's judgment free. So that's what I would really say. And then I talk a lot to families. And if you're worried about a family member, again, I can't emphasize enough, share podcasts like this, share resources, but most of all, ask the question, how are you doing today? And really mean it. Because they may say, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, even if you know they're not, but you're planting a seed and you never know when that seed will start to germinate. They need to know that you're available, that you don't judge, and that you'll help them find care.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. And everyone, remember the people in your circle, they're in your circle for a reason, right? Lean on each other and get through each day a little more smoothly. Melissa, it's so great to see you. Thank you so much for joining me on another show. Everyone, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss great guests like Melissa. Now, where can we say hi to you and connect with you and also your website?
I love to have conversations. I love to talk about breaking down the stigma of mental health and substance use disorder. So please reach out. Great way to reach me is through LinkedIn, Melissa Forrest Shackelford. I love to connect people there. Also, my website, melissaforrestshackelford.com. Please reach out. I love to do podcasts like this and speak to audiences and have conversations with individuals about what we can do to make care available to more people.
Thank you for sharing, everyone. Be sure to connect and also go check out that entrepreneur show and the directory. You'll catch your amazing and inspiring journey there, too. My name is Vincent A. Lancy, and I want to thank you for tuning in and remind you to subscribe and stay current. Drop a comment. Let us know what you loved about today's show. And with that, we're signing off today. Melissa, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day, Vincent.